My name is Elena Martinez, and for 3 years, I believed I was helping to save lives. I thought my husband Marcus and I were the perfect power couple, him with his real estate empire, me with my growing social media presence, and together we ran Hope for Tomorrow, a charity that fed homeless families and supported women's shelters across the city. What I didn't know was that every dollar I distributed, every smile I shared with grateful mothers, every video I posted showing our good work was actually part of Marcus's elaborate tax evasion scheme. And when I finally discovered the truth, he didn't just betray me, he tried to destroy me completely. Chapter 1. The perfect partnership. It started so beautifully. Marcus came home one evening in September 2021, his dark eyes bright with excitement. We'd been married for 5 years then, and I'd grown used to his business enthusiasm. But this felt different. "Elena, baby, I have an idea that could change everything," he said, loosening his expensive tie as he sat beside me on our Italian leather sofa. Our penthouse apartment overlooked the city lights, and in that moment, I felt like we were on top of the world. "Tell me," I said, pausing the Netflix show I'd been watching and giving him my full attention, "what if we started a charity, something real, something meaningful? You have 40,000 followers on Instagram now, and my company is doing incredible numbers. We could actually make a difference." I stared at him, my heart swelling with pride. This was the man I'd fallen in love with. Ambitious, yes, but also caring. At least, that is what I thought. "What kind of charity?" I asked, already imagining the possibilities. "Homeless families, women's shelters. Think about it, you document everything, show the real impact we're making, and I handle the business side. We could help hundreds of people while building something beautiful together." That night, we stayed up until 3 a.m. planning. Marcus sketched out organizational structures while I researched the most effective ways to help homeless communities. We dreamed about the families we'd feed, the women we'd empower, the children we'd give hope to. "Hope for Tomorrow," I suggested, as we brainstormed names. "Perfect," Marcus said, kissing my forehead. "You are perfect." Within 6 months, we were officially registered as a 501(c)(3) nonprofit organization. Marcus handled all the paperwork, he said. His business lawyers made it easy. I focused on what I did best, connecting with people and telling their stories. My first video for Hope for Tomorrow got 50,000 views. I stood outside a women's shelter, distributing care packages we'd assembled, sharing the stories of 3 mothers who'd escaped domestic violence. The comments poured in, people crying, people praising us, people wanting to donate. "We're making a real difference," I told Marcus that night. Reading him some of the comments, he smiled and held me close. "You are amazing. Baby, keep doing exactly what you are doing." For the next 2 years, this became our routine. Every month, Marcus would transfer money into our charity account, sometimes $15,000, sometimes $25,000, once even $40,000. I would spend days planning how to distribute it most effectively. I'd visit shelters, organize food drives, buy supplies for families in need, and document everything on social media. My following grew to over 200,000 people. Local news stations started featuring our work. I was invited to speak at community events about grassroots charity work. People would stop me on the street to thank me for what we were doing. Marcus seemed proud, but in hindsight, I realized he was often distracted during these conversations. When I'd excitedly tell him about a family we'd helped find permanent housing or a woman who'd gotten back on her feet, thanks to our support, he'd nod and smile, but his mind was elsewhere. "You handle the heart of the operation," he'd tell me. "I'll handle the boring business stuff." I trusted him completely. Why wouldn't I? He was my husband, my partner, and apparently, my partner in making the world better. But there were small things that bothered me, though I pushed them aside. Like how Marcus never wanted to appear in videos with me. "You are the face of Hope for Tomorrow," he'd say. "People connect with you." Or how he seemed annoyed when I asked questions about our donor list or financial records. "Elena, you don't need to worry about that stuff. Focus on what you are good at." The first real warning sign came in March 2024. I was at the shelter where I volunteered most often, speaking with Sarah, a single mother of 2 who'd been staying there for 3 months. She pulled me aside with tears in her eyes. "Elena, I don't know how to thank you and your husband. The caseworker told me that Hope for Tomorrow has been sending money directly to the shelter for months. Not just the supplies you bring, she said we've received over $60,000 from your organization this year alone. I smiled and hugged her, but inside, I was confused. As far as I knew, we'd distributed maybe $15,000 to that particular shelter through the supplies and direct assistance I'd personally handled. When I got home, I decided to ask Marcus about it. Oh, that, he said, barely looking up from his laptop. I've been making some additional direct contributions, more efficient than always going through you for every little thing. Something in his tone bothered me, but I let it go after all. If more money was helping people, wasn't that a good thing? The second warning sign was more obvious. In May 2024, I received a call from the IRS. A polite agent named Miss Rodriguez wanted to schedule a meeting to discuss Hope for Tomorrow's tax filings. Nothing to worry about, Mrs. Martinez, she assured me. We just need to verify some information for our records. When I told Marcus, his reaction was immediate and intense. Absolutely not, he said. His voice sharp in a way I'd never heard before. You don't talk to the IRS without a lawyer present. I'll handle this. But Marcus, I am listed as the primary contact for the charity, and we haven't done anything wrong, right? He grabbed my shoulders, his grip tight. Elena, listen to me carefully. You know nothing about the financial side of the charity. If anyone asks Faye anyone, Faye, you refer them to me or our lawyers. Do not answer questions about money, donations, or tax filings. Do you understand me? I was shocked by his intensity, but I nodded. Of course, honey. I just don't understand why you seem so worried. I am not worried. I am being careful. There is a difference. The IRS meeting was rescheduled 3 times over the next 2 months, always by Marcus's lawyers. Each time, Marcus seemed more stressed, more distant. He started working late more often, and when he was home, he was glued to his phone. Our relationship began to change in subtle ways. Marcus became impatient with my charity work stories. When I'd try to share something meaningful that had happened during my day, he'd interrupt with work calls or find reasons to leave the room. You spend too much time with those people, he said one evening in July, as I was editing a video about a successful job placement program we'd supported. Those people, Marcus, they're the families we're helping. You know what I mean, you are getting too emotionally involved. It is not professional. I stared at him. Not professional, Marcus, this is charity work, not a corporate merger. Emotions are the whole point. He sighed and rubbed his temples. Elena, you are naive. You see everything through rose-colored glasses. The real world is more complicated than you understand. That word naive stung more than he probably intended. I'd heard it from him more frequently lately, always in contexts that made me feel small and stupid. But I pushed through. The families I was helping needed me. And despite Marcus's growing coldness, I believed in our mission. Number Chapter 2. The devastating discovery. The end of my marriage began with a simple mistake. On the 15th of August 2024, I was supposed to pick up catering for a Hope for Tomorrow fundraising event, but the vendor called to say they'd had an emergency and needed payment upfront instead of the net -30 terms we usually used. I called Marcus, but he was in meetings all day. The event was that evening, and I couldn't let down the 150 people who were expecting dinner. So I did something I'd never done before. I logged into the Hope for Tomorrow business account to transfer the $3,200 needed for catering. Marcus had always handled all financial access, but I was listed as a signatory, so the bank gave me login credentials when I called. Just this once, I told myself, for the event. What I saw on that bank statement changed my life forever. Our account showed a balance of $847,000. I stared at the screen, certain there was an error. According to my records, we should have had maybe $12,000 in the account, the remainder from Marcus's most recent contribution after my latest distribution to families in need. With trembling hands, I clicked on the transaction history. What I found made me physically sick. Marcus hadn't been giving us $15,000, $40,000 per month for charity. He'd been depositing $200,000, $400,000 per month. Over the past year alone, nearly $3.5 million had flowed through our charity account, but the withdrawals were even more shocking. Yes. I could see my small distributions, Faye $2,000 here, $5,000 there, the amounts I'd personally given to families and organizations, but there were massive withdrawals I'd never made. $150,000 to administrative costs, $275,000 to consulting fees, $320,000 to program development. All of these withdrawals were signed off on by Marcus as executive director, Faye, a title I didn't even know he'd given himself. I scrolled through months of records, my heart pounding harder with each page. The pattern was clear: massive deposits, tiny amounts actually distributed to people in need, and enormous administrative costs that I knew nothing about. According to these records, Hope for Tomorrow had received over $8 million in donations over 3 years. But I'd personally distributed maybe $300,000 to actual families and shelters. Where had the rest gone? I printed everything, page after page of bank statements, transaction records, deposit slips. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely feed the paper into the printer. When Marcus came home that evening, I was sitting at our dining table with the documents spread out in front of me. He walked in whistling, carrying flowers, Faye white roses, my favorites. "Hey beautiful, how did the event go?" he asked, then stopped when he saw the papers. His face went completely pale, then flushed red with anger. "What the hell are you doing with those?" "Marcus, we need to talk." My voice was surprisingly steady, though inside I was falling apart. "Where is this money coming from, and where is it going?" He set the flowers down hard, water splashing from the vase. "Elena, you have no business looking at financial records without talking to me first. I am listed as co-founder of this charity, Marcus. I have every right to understand our finances. You have the right to do what you do best, Faye, make videos and hand out supplies. Leave the complex stuff to people who understand it." That word again, Faye, naive, implied if not spoken. "Complex stuff, Marcus. These records show millions of dollars moving through our account, millions, and almost none of it is reaching the people we're supposed to help." He sat down across from me, his expression shifting from anger to something that looked like pity. "Elena, sweetheart, you don't understand how nonprofits work. There are operational costs, administrative fees, legal compliance expenses. It is not as simple as just handing cash to homeless people. Operational costs of $275,000 in 1 month. Administrative fees that are 10 times larger than our actual charitable giving, Marcus. This looks like money laundering." The words hung in the air between us. I'd said it, the thing I'd been thinking but was afraid to voice. Marcus laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Money laundering, Elena. Listen to yourself. You watch too many crime documentaries." He reached across the table and gathered up the papers. "These are legitimate business expenses, marketing consultants, legal fees, compliance costs. If you understood the first thing about running a real organization, you'd know that." "Then explain it to me," I said, grabbing some of the papers back. "Show me exactly where this money is going." "I don't owe you an explanation, Elena. You are not my business partner. Faye, you are my wife who volunteers for our charity. There is a difference." The coldness in his voice shocked me more than his words. "Marcus, what is happening to us? We built this together. We're supposed to be partners." "We are partners. You do what you are good at, Faye, looking pretty on camera and making people feel good. I handle the real work." "The real work, Marcus. I've spent 3 years of my life building relationships with these families, documenting their stories, organizing distributions." "That is not real work. It is volunteer work, Elena, important volunteer work, but at the end of the day, you are essentially a very expensive social media manager. The actual business of running a multi-million-dollar organization requires skills you don't have." Each word hit like a physical blow. This man, who'd held me while I cried over families we couldn't help, who'd praised my passion and dedication, was now dismissing everything I'd done as essentially meaningless. "Fine," I said, standing up. "If I am just a volunteer, then I want to see the real books. I want to understand exactly how our millions of dollars in donations are being spent, and I want to know where this money is coming from, because if we're receiving this much in donations, shouldn't I know about our major donors?" Marcus stood too, and for the first time in our 8-year relationship, I felt afraid of him. Not physically afraid. Faye Marcus had never been violent. Faye, but afraid of the stranger I was seeing in his eyes. Elena, you are going to drop this right now. You are going to trust me to handle the business side of our organization, and you are going to keep doing what you do best. If you can't handle that arrangement, maybe you need to step back from Hope for Tomorrow entirely. Step back, Marcus. This is my life's work. These families depend on me. These families depend on the money that I bring in and the operations that I manage. You are replaceable, Elena. Your social media presence is nice, but there are thousands of influencers who could do what you do. What I do. Faye managing millions in charitable operations. Faye requires real expertise. I felt like he'd slapped me. After everything we'd built together, after all the nights we'd stayed up planning ways to help more people, after all the families whose lives we'd changed, he saw me as just another replaceable social media girl. I need some air, I said, grabbing my purse. Elena, wait. But I was already walking toward the door. I needed space to think, to process what I'd learned, to figure out what any of this meant. I drove aimlessly for 2 hours, crying and trying to understand how my perfect marriage and meaningful work had become this nightmare. When I finally went home, Marcus was gone. There was a note on the kitchen counter, staying at the office tonight, we'll talk tomorrow when you've calmed down. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I did something I'd never done before. I researched my own charity online. Chapter 3. The unraveling truth. What I found during that sleepless night destroyed the last of my trust in Marcus forever. I started by Googling Hope for Tomorrow charity reviews and found dozens of posts on social media from people claiming they donated money to our organization, but had never received any updates on how their contributions were used. One post particularly stood out. Donated $5,000 to Hope for Tomorrow last year after seeing Elena's videos. Asked for a breakdown of how my money was used and was told by their admin that individual donor reports aren't available. Seems sketch for such a small charities. Small charity. I clicked through to the official Hope for Tomorrow website that I thought I knew well, but there was a section I'd never seen before. Corporate partnerships. According to this page, Hope for Tomorrow was funded primarily through partnerships with major corporations looking to fulfill their philanthropic obligations. The page listed companies I'd never heard of, along with donation amounts that made my head spin. Meridian Holdings, $2.4 million. Coastal Development Group, $1.8 million. Summit Investment Partners, $3.1 million. I googled these companies. Meridian Holdings was a real estate development company. The CEO, Marcus Martinez, my husband. Coastal Development Group was a property management company, primary stakeholder, Marcus Martinez. Summit Investment Partners was a real estate investment firm. Founding partner Marcus Martinez. Me husband had been donating money to our charity from his own companies. Millions of dollars, money that was then being claimed as tax-deductible charitable contributions, while most of it was being cycled back out of the charity through administrative costs that probably went right back to Marcus's businesses. This wasn't charity. This was tax fraud on a massive scale, and I was the unwitting face of the operation. I kept digging. Financial records I found online showed that Marcus's companies had claimed over $12 million in charitable deductions over the past 3 years. If they were in the 35% corporate tax bracket, that meant they'd avoided paying over $4 million in taxes. Meanwhile, according to my own records, we'd actually distributed maybe $300,000 to families in need. The rest, millions of dollars, had disappeared into administrative costs that I now realized were just Marcus paying himself and his companies for services that probably didn't exist. By sunrise, I understood the full scope of what Marcus had done. He'd used me, my social media presence, my genuine passion for helping people, and my complete trust in him to create a charity that was actually a sophisticated tax evasion scheme. The families I'd helped, the women I'd empowered, the children I'd fed, that was all real. But it was just window dressing for Marcus's financial crimes. I'd been the perfect unwitting accomplice because I actually believed in what we were doing. When Marcus came home that morning, he found me sitting in the exact same spot at the dining table surrounded by new printouts. Elena, you look terrible. Did you sleep at all? I know what you are doing, I said quietly. He set down his coffee cup and looked at the papers I'd spread out. Corporate filing documents, tax records I'd found online. Screenshots of his company's charitable giving claims. Elena, you are using me to commit tax fraud. Hope for Tomorrow isn't a charity, Faye. It is a money laundering operation. You donate money from your companies to our charity, claim massive tax deductions, then cycle most of the money back to yourself through fake administrative costs. Marcus sat down slowly. For the first time since yesterday's confrontation, he looked genuinely concerned. It is not that simple. It is exactly that simple. Marcus, and you made me the face of it. Every video I've posted, every family I've helped, every speech I've given, has been used to legitimize your fraud. I am an accessory to tax evasion, and I didn't even know it. Elena, listen to me. What I am doing is completely legal, sophisticated but legal. These are legitimate business expenses. Paying yourself $275,000 per month in consulting fees from a charity, that is legal. The charity pays for professional services, yes, marketing, strategic planning, financial management, legal compliance. These services have real value, and they're properly documented. So you set up fake consulting agreements between Hope for Tomorrow and your own companies, then paid yourself millions of dollars for services that don't exist. Marcus rubbed his temples. The services exist, Elena. You just don't understand how complex business operations work. Then explain it to me. Show me exactly what services your companies provide to Hope for Tomorrow that justify millions of dollars in payments. I shouldn't have to justify my business decisions to someone who doesn't understand basic corporate finance. There it was again, Faye, the implication that I was too stupid to understand what was really happening. But now I knew the truth. Marcus needed me to be ignorant. His entire scheme depended on having a genuine, passionate, believable face for the charity, while keeping that face completely unaware of the financial crimes happening behind the scenes. Marcus, what happens when the IRS figures this out? The IRS has already reviewed our filings. Everything is properly documented and legally compliant. That is not what I mean, and you know it. What happens when someone realizes that Hope for Tomorrow claims to have distributed $8 million to homeless families over 3 years? But the actual families and shelters we work with have only received $300,000. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that chilled me to the bone. Elena, you need to decide right now whether you are going to trust me or whether you are going to be a problem. A problem. You can continue doing what you've been doing, Faye, helping families, making videos, being the heart of Hope for Tomorrow, Faye, and trusting me to handle the complex business side. Or you can keep asking questions that you don't understand the answers to and potentially destroy everything we've built. Everything you've built. You mean, everything we've built. Elena, your name is on every document. You are listed as co-founder and primary spokesperson. If there were any problems with Hope for Tomorrow, Faye, which there won't be, Faye, you'd be just as legally responsible as I am. The threat was crystal clear. I was already implicated. Whether I'd known about the fraud or not, I was legally connected to it. Marcus had made sure of that. You set me up, I whispered. I protected you by keeping you focused on what you are good at. You used me. I gave you a platform to help people and build a meaningful career. Before Hope for Tomorrow, you were just another influencer posting workout videos and lifestyle content. Now you are known as someone who makes a real difference. He wasn't wrong. My work with Hope for Tomorrow had given my life purpose and meaning in ways I'd never experienced before. The families I'd helped were real. The impact I'd made was real, but it had all been built on a foundation of lies and crimes. What happens now? I asked. No, you decide whether you want to keep helping families, or whether you want to destroy the organization that makes that possible. I want to see every financial record, Marcus, every bank statement, every contract, every invoice. I want to understand exactly how this organization works. What do you mean no? I mean no, Elena. You don't get to see confidential business records, just because you are having an emotional reaction to seeing numbers you don't understand. I am listed as co-founder of this organization. You are listed as co-founder because that is good for our public image and our tax filings. but you are not actually qualified to understand or manage the business operations of a multi-million-dollar charity. Each word was designed to make me feel smaller, stupider, less capable, and for a moment, it worked. Maybe I was in over my head. Maybe Marcus really was handling legitimate business operations that were too complex for me to understand. But then I thought about Sarah, the single mother at the shelter who'd told me about the $60,000 that Hope for Tomorrow had supposedly donated directly. I thought about all the families who'd thanked me for help they thought they'd received from our charity, but that I'd never actually arranged. I am done, Marcus. Done with what? Done with Hope for Tomorrow. Done with being the face of an organization I don't understand. Done with you treating me like I am too stupid to understand my own life's work. Marcus's expression shifted from condescension to genuine alarm. Elena, you can't just quit Hope for Tomorrow. People depend on you. And frankly, the organization depends on you, your social media presence, your credibility with families and donors. Faye, that is what makes everything else possible. Then maybe it is time for everything else to stop being possible. I stood up and walked toward the bedroom to pack a bag. Elena, if you walk away from Hope for Tomorrow, you'll be walking away from the most meaningful work you've ever done. And if you try to cause problems for the organization, you'll be destroying the lives of every family we help. I stopped in the doorway. Are you threatening me, Marcus? I am explaining reality to you. Your choice. Number Chapter 4. The Awakening. I moved in with my best friend Carmen for a week while I tried to figure out what to do every day. I received dozens of messages from followers asking when my next Hope for Tomorrow video would be posted, when our next distribution event would be scheduled, whether I was okay because I'd been quiet on social media. These messages broke my heart because I realized how many people genuinely cared about the work they thought I was doing. The problem was, I no longer knew what work I'd actually been doing. Marcus called me constantly. He alternated between apologies and threats, between promising to be more transparent and warning me about the legal consequences of abandoning my responsibilities. But the call that changed everything came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Martinez, this is Agent Sarah Chen with the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. My blood went cold. Oh, hello. Mrs. Martinez, we've been conducting an investigation into Hope for Tomorrow's tax filings, and we'd like to schedule an interview with you. My husband said I should refer all questions about our charity's finances to our lawyers. Mrs. Martinez, you are not in trouble. We believe you may be a victim in this situation rather than a perpetrator, but we do need to speak with you. A victim. The word hit me like a physical relief. Someone else could see what I was starting to understand, Faye, that I'd been used. When would you like to meet? How about tomorrow morning? And Mrs. Martinez, you might want to bring your own lawyer. Someone who represents your interests specifically, not the charity's interests. That night, I lay awake thinking about everything I'd learned. Marcus had built a sophisticated financial crime around my genuine desire to help people. He'd used my passion, my credibility, and my trust to create the perfect cover for tax evasion, but he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd insisted on keeping me ignorant of the financial details, while making me the public face of the operation. That meant I had a paper trail of genuine charitable work that proved my intent, while he had a paper trail of financial manipulation that proved his guilt. The next morning, I met with Agent Chen and my new lawyer Faye, a woman Carmen had recommended who specialized in white-collar crime victims. Mrs. Martinez, Agent Chen began, our investigation shows that Hope for Tomorrow has been used as a vehicle for tax evasion and money laundering. We believe your husband orchestrated this scheme and used your public profile to legitimize it. She showed me documents I'd never seen before, financial records that proved Marcus's companies had claimed $12.3 million in charitable deductions over 3 years, while Hope for Tomorrow had actually distributed less than $400,000 to legitimate charitable causes. The good news, my lawyer said, is that your social media records, personal financial records, and documented interactions with the families you've helped all support the conclusion that you genuinely believed Hope for Tomorrow was a legitimate charity. What does that mean for me legally? It means you are likely to be treated as a victim rather than a co-conspirator, Agent Chen explained. But we do need your cooperation in building our case against your husband. What kind of cooperation? We need you to document everything you know about Hope for tomorrow's operations, every conversation with your husband about finances, every question you asked that he deflected, every red flag you noticed. We also need access to any records you have of actual charitable distributions. I spent the next 6 weeks working with the IRS to build their case against Marcus. It was heartbreaking work, because it meant acknowledging that most of what I'd believed about my life's work was a lie. But it was also liberating because I finally understood why Marcus had been so controlling about finances, so dismissive of my questions, so condescending about my simple understanding of charity work. He'd needed me to stay ignorant to keep his scheme working. The hardest part was reaching out to the families I'd worked with to explain what had happened. Many of them were confused from their perspective. I'd genuinely helped them, and they didn't understand why it mattered where the money had originally come from. But some of them were angry, feeling like they'd been used as props in Marcus's financial crimes, and a few of them gave me information that proved crucial to the IRS case. Sarah, the single mother from the shelter, told me that she'd never actually received the $60,000 that Hope for Tomorrow had claimed to donate to her shelter. The shelter's director confirmed that they'd received maybe $8,000 from us over 3 years, not the $200,000 that Marcus's records showed. This pattern repeated everywhere. I looked. Marcus had been creating fake documentation of charitable distributions to justify his massive administrative withdrawals, but the actual recipients had never received most of the money during this investigation period. Marcus became increasingly desperate. He showed up at Carmen's apartment multiple times, begging me to stop destroying our family and our mission. "Elena, you are going to ruin everything we built together," he said during one particularly intense confrontation. "All those families you helped that work won't matter anymore if you destroy the organization that made it possible." Marcus, the organization was never what I thought it was. I helped those families despite your fraud, not because of it. You don't understand the complexities of what we were doing. I understand enough. I understand that you used me to legitimize tax evasion. I understand that you made me complicit in crimes I didn't know I was committing, and I understand that you never respected me enough to be honest about what Hope for Tomorrow really was. I was protecting you. You were using me. There is a difference. As the IRS investigation intensified, Marcus hired expensive lawyers and tried to shift blame onto me. He claimed that I'd been fully aware of Hope for Tomorrow's financial structure and had been a willing participant in maximizing our tax benefits. But the evidence didn't support his claims. My social media posts, my personal financial records, my documented conversations with families everything showed that I genuinely believed we were running a legitimate charity. Meanwhile, I faced a terrible personal decision. The IRS had offered me immunity in exchange for my cooperation, but that meant testifying against my husband in federal court. Despite everything he'd done, despite how he'd used and manipulated me, the idea of sending Marcus to prison felt overwhelming. But then I thought about all the families who could have been helped with the millions of dollars Marcus had stolen through fake tax deductions. I thought about the other charities who were doing legitimate work with far fewer resources, and I thought about what would happen if I let Marcus get away with this. Would he do it again with someone else? Chapter 5. The confrontation. The trial was scheduled to begin in November 2024. But Marcus made one last attempt to control the narrative. He scheduled a press conference in October, announcing that Hope for Tomorrow would be hosting a major fundraising gala with celebrity guests and corporate sponsors. I watched the press conference online from Carmen's apartment, feeling sick as Marcus stood at a podium talking about the incredible impact Elena and I have made together through Hope for Tomorrow. "My wife Elena has been the heart and soul of our organization," he said to the cameras. "Her passion for helping families has inspired millions of people to support our mission. We're excited to continue growing Hope for Tomorrow's impact in the coming year." The reporters asked about rumors of financial irregularities, and Marcus smoothly deflected. "Like any successful nonprofit, we've faced some administrative questions from regulatory agencies. We're fully cooperating with all inquiries and are confident that our complete transparency will demonstrate Hope for Tomorrow's commitment to proper operations." Then he said something that made me realize I had to act. "In fact, I am proud to announce that Hope for Tomorrow will be expanding our operations next year. We've secured partnerships with several new corporate sponsors, and Elena will be launching a new social media campaign to reach even more families in need. He was planning to continue the scheme, even with an active IRS investigation, even knowing that I'd cooperated with federal agents. Marcus was planning to keep using my name and reputation to legitimize his fraud. I called Agent Chen immediately. He has announced a fundraising gala and expansion plans. He is still planning to use my name and image to continue the fraud. Mrs. Martinez, we're prepared to make arrests as soon as you give us the word. Are you ready to move forward? I thought about all the families who would donate money to Hope for Tomorrow, thinking they were supporting genuine charity work. I thought about the corporate sponsors who would claim tax deductions for contributions that would mostly disappear into Marcus's administrative costs. I thought about how many people would be hurt by allowing Marcus's scheme to continue. I am ready. The arrests happened during Marcus's fundraising gala. I wasn't there, but Carmen showed me the news coverage. Federal agents walked into the ballroom of a 5-star hotel and arrested Marcus in front of 300 donors, corporate sponsors, and local dignitaries. The footage showed Marcus in his expensive tuxedo, hands cuffed behind his back, being led past tables full of people who'd believed they were supporting legitimate charity work. That night, Marcus called me from jail. Elena, you have destroyed everything. I've stopped a crime, Marcus. There is a difference. You've ruined your own life. You realize that your reputation, your career, your future fate is all gone now. Who is going to trust you after this? People who understand that I was trying to do the right thing. You were naive and vindictive, and now everyone will know it. I hung up the phone and for the first time in months, felt truly free. Chapter 6. Rebuilding from Truth. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I testified for 2 full days, explaining how Marcus had manipulated me into becoming the unknowing face of his tax evasion scheme. The prosecution showed that Marcus had stolen over $4 million in taxes through Hope for Tomorrow's fake charitable deductions, while actually distributing less than $400,000 to families in need. Marcus's defense tried to portray me as a willing co-conspirator, who was now trying to avoid responsibility by playing victim, but the evidence was overwhelming. My social media history, my personal financial records, my documented interactions with families, and my immediate cooperation with the IRS investigation, all proved that I genuinely believed Hope for Tomorrow was legitimate. The jury found Marcus guilty on 12 counts of tax evasion and money laundering. He was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $4.2 million in restitution. But the legal victory felt hollow because I still had to rebuild my life from the wreckage of Marcus's crimes. My social media following, built over 3 years of charity work, largely abandoned me once the news broke. Some people understood that I'd been a victim, but many blamed me for either being complicit in the fraud or being too stupid to notice it. How could you not know your husband was stealing millions of dollars? One comment read, either you are lying about being innocent, or you are too dumb to be trusted with charity work. Both possibilities hurt, but I understood people's anger. They donated money and time to Hope for Tomorrow based on trust in me, and regardless of my intent, that trust had been betrayed. I started over completely. I got a job working for a legitimate non-profit a women's shelter, where I'd actually volunteered during my Hope for Tomorrow days. The director, Maria Santos, had followed the trial and understood what had happened to me. Elena, what Marcus did to you is what abusers do. They isolate you from information, make you dependent on their version of reality, and then use your genuine good intentions to further their own goals. The fact that you had the courage to expose his crimes and testify against him shows who you really are. Working at the shelter was humbling but healing. I made $35,000 a year instead of living off Marcus's millions. I worked directly with families instead of documenting our help for social media. I learned about the day-to-day realities of running a legitimate charity with proper oversight and financial transparency. Most importantly, I learned to trust my own judgment again. Marcus had spent years making me feel like I was too naive, too emotional, too simple to understand complex situations. But my instincts had been right. I'd known something was wrong with Hope for Tomorrow's finances, and I'd had the courage to investigate and ultimately expose the truth. 6 months after the trial, I started a new social media account, not to promote charity work this time, but to share my story and help other women recognize the signs of financial manipulation in relationships. My first video got 50,000 views in 24 hours. It was called How My Husband Used My Charity Work to Commit Tax Fraud, and in it, I explained exactly how Marcus had manipulated me into becoming the unwitting face of his crimes. The comments were mixed. Some people praised me for speaking out and helping others avoid similar manipulation. Others continued to blame me for being too trusting or not asking enough questions. But the message that meant the most came from Sarah, the single mother from the shelter. Elena, what you did for my family was real. The supplies you brought, the time you spent with my kids, the way you made us feel like human beings instead of charity cases, Faye, that was all real. Marcus stole money, but he couldn't steal the genuine care you showed us. Thank you for having the courage to tell the truth. A year after the trial, I married David, a social worker I met at the women's shelter. Our wedding was small, Faye, just family and close friends. Faye and we paid for everything ourselves with money we'd saved from our nonprofit salaries. David had known my story from the beginning, and he'd never made me feel naive or stupid for trusting Marcus. Instead, he'd helped me understand that my willingness to see the best in people and work for meaningful causes wasn't a weakness. Fate was a strength that had been exploited by someone who didn't deserve it. On our wedding day, Maria Santos gave a toast that made me cry. Elena, you've shown all of us what real integrity looks like. When you discovered that the work you loved was built on lies, you chose truth over comfort, justice over self-protection, and the well-being of vulnerable families over your own reputation. That is not naive, Faye, that is heroic. Number Chapter 7. The Legacy of Truth. 2 years after Marcus's conviction, I received a call that changed my perspective on everything I'd been through. Mrs. Martinez, this is Jennifer Walsh from the Department of Justice. We're calling to let you know that your testimony in the Hope for Tomorrow case has led to a much larger investigation into charity fraud schemes. What do you mean? Your case helped us identify a pattern of sophisticated tax evasion using fake charitable organizations. We've now uncovered 12 similar schemes operating across the country, involving over $50 million in stolen taxes. Your willingness to come forward started a chain reaction that is helping us protect legitimate charities and the families they serve. I sat down hard in my kitchen chair. 12 schemes? 12 that we've confirmed so far. The model your husband used, Faye, creating a charity with a genuine public face while cycling corporate donations back through administrative fees. Faye appears to be more widespread than we initially realized. Are there other women like me, other people who were manipulated into being the face of fraud? Yes, and several of them have contacted us specifically because they saw your story and realized what was happening to them. After I hung up, I cried for an hour, not from sadness, but from a profound sense of relief and purpose. My decision to expose Marcus's crimes hadn't just been about justice for our situation, Faye. It had helped protect other families from being victimized by similar schemes. That evening, I posted a video called, Why I Am Grateful I Discovered My Husband's Charity Fraud. In it, I explained how learning about the other cases had helped me understand that my experience wasn't just personal, Faye. It was part of a larger pattern of financial abuse that needed to be exposed. The video got 2 million views in a week. More importantly, it generated dozens of messages from people who suspected they might be involved in similar schemes, either as victims or as unwitting accomplices. I started consulting with the DOJ to help identify and investigate charity fraud cases. My experience with Marcus had given me insights into how these schemes operate and how they manipulate well-meaning people into providing cover for financial crimes. But the work that meant the most to me was the support group I started for people who'd been financially manipulated by partners, employers, or family members. We met weekly at the women's shelter, and I was amazed by how common these experiences were. The thing about financial abuse, I told the group during one session, is that it makes you question your own intelligence and judgment. The abuser needs you to believe you are too stupid to understand what is really happening, because your ignorance is what makes their scheme work. A woman named Patricia, whose husband had used her business to launder drug money without her knowledge, nodded vigorously. He always said I was better with people than with numbers, like being good with people made me automatically bad with money. Exactly. They use our strengths against us. They take our genuine care for others, our trust in people we love, our willingness to focus on meaningful work rather than financial details, and they weaponize those qualities. These conversations were healing for me because they helped me understand that I hadn't been uniquely naive or stupid. I'd been deliberately manipulated by someone who understood exactly how to exploit my values and priorities. 3 years after Marcus's conviction, I was invited to speak at a conference for nonprofit executives about recognizing and preventing charity fraud. As I stood at the podium looking out at an audience of people who dedicated their lives to legitimate charitable work, I felt a deep sense of purpose. The most insidious thing about charity fraud, I told them, is that it doesn't just steal money, it steals trust. Every dollar that is diverted from legitimate charitable work is a dollar that doesn't reach families in need, but more than that, every fake charity that gets exposed makes it harder for legitimate organizations to earn the public trust they need to do their work. After my speech, a woman approached me with tears in her eyes. "Miss Martinez, my name is Rebecca Thompson. I run a food bank in Ohio, and last year we lost 3 major corporate sponsors because they were nervous about charity fraud after hearing about cases like yours. I wanted to thank you for speaking out because people like you help the public understand the difference between legitimate charities and scams." Her words meant more to me than any praise I'd received during my Hope for Tomorrow days, because I knew that my current work was built on truth rather than lies. Chapter 8, Full Circle. 5 years after the trial, I received an unexpected letter from Marcus in federal prison. I'd had no contact with him since that final phone call on the night of his arrest, and seeing his handwriting on the envelope made my hands shake. "Elena," the letter began, "I know I have no right to contact you, and I know you have no reason to read this letter, but I need you to know that I understand now what I did to you." He went on to explain that he'd been required to attend therapy sessions in prison focusing on financial crimes and victim impact. For the first time, he claimed, he understood that he'd manipulated and abused me. "I told myself that I was protecting you by keeping you focused on the people side of our charity while I handled the business side, but I see now that I was using your genuine care for others to cover up my crimes. I made you complicit in something you never would have chosen to be part of if you'd understood what was really happening." The letter continued, "I've followed your work since the trial, and I am amazed by what you've built from the wreckage I left behind. You've helped more people by exposing my crimes and preventing others from being victimized than we ever helped through Hope for Tomorrow. I am proud of you, and I am sorry for what I took from you." He ended by saying he didn't expect or want a response, but that he needed me to know he finally understood the magnitude of what he'd done. I showed the letter to David, who read it carefully before looking up at me. "How does it make you feel?" "Honestly sad, not sad for him, but sad for who we could have been if he'd been honest from the beginning. We could have built something genuinely meaningful together." "Do you forgive him?" I thought about that question for a long time. I forgive him for my own peace, not for his benefit, but I don't trust him, and I never will. There is a difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. David nodded. "And there is a difference between understanding why someone did something and excusing them for doing it." That conversation helped me realize how much I'd grown since my Hope for Tomorrow days. The Elena who'd been married to Marcus would have seen his letter as proof that he'd changed. That maybe we could rebuild our relationship. The Elena I'd become understood that some betrayals are too fundamental to overcome, regardless of apologies or explanations. 6 years after the trial, the women's shelter where I worked received an unexpected donation, $4.2 million from the Department of Justice the full amount of restitution Marcus had been ordered to pay. Maria Santos called me into her office to give me the news. "Elena, they're giving us the money Marcus stole, and they want you to oversee how it is distributed." I stared at her in disbelief. "They want me to handle $4.2 million. They want you to make sure it goes to legitimate charitable work this time. They trust your judgment about what genuine charity looks like." Over the next year, I worked with a team of accountants, lawyers, and nonprofit experts to distribute Marcus's restitution payments to organizations across the country. We funded women's shelters, homeless services, job training programs, and family support services, all the work that Hope for Tomorrow had claimed to be doing. But this time, every dollar was tracked, every distribution was verified, and every recipient organization had to meet strict standards for financial transparency and accountability. The day we distributed the final payment, I sat in my office looking at the spreadsheet, showing where every dollar had gone. $4.2 million that had been stolen through lies and manipulation was now funding genuine charitable work that would help thousands of families. It felt like the most complete justice possible. Marcus had used my desire to help people as cover for his crimes, but ultimately my willingness to expose those crimes had ensured that his stolen money still ended up helping the people it was supposed to help all along. Number Epilogue. The woman I became today, 7 years after discovering the truth about Hope for Tomorrow. I wake up every morning in a home that David and I bought with money we earned through honest work. I go to a job where I help women escape domestic violence and rebuild their lives. I come home to a husband who respects my intelligence, values my judgment, and would never dream of manipulating me for his own gain. My social media following is smaller now, about 75,000 people instead of the 200,000 I had during my Hope for Tomorrow days. But these followers are engaged with my actual work, rather than a false image Marcus created. They support my advocacy for financial transparency in charities, and my efforts to help women recognize financial manipulation. I've learned that being naive isn't the same as being stupid, and that trusting people isn't the same as being gullible. Marcus exploited my trust, but that doesn't mean trust itself is wrong. It means I needed to learn to trust people who deserve it, and recognize when someone is using my good intentions against me. The families I helped through Hope for Tomorrow were real. The impact I made in their lives was genuine. Marcus couldn't steal that from me, even though he stole everything else. But the work I do now means more to me because it is built on truth. Every dollar I help distribute goes exactly where donors intended. Every family I help gets assistance without being used as a prop in someone else's scheme. Every relationship I build is based on honesty rather than manipulation. Sometimes people ask me if I regret exposing Marcus's crimes, especially on days when I am struggling financially or dealing with online harassment from people who still blame me for being too trusting. The answer is always no. I regret trusting someone who didn't deserve it, but I don't regret choosing truth over comfort when I learned what was really happening. Marcus used my passion for helping people to commit crimes, but he couldn't destroy that passion. If anything, my experience taught me that genuine charitable work is too important to be corrupted by people who see others' generosity as an opportunity for personal gain. The woman I am today is stronger, wiser, and more careful about trust than the woman I was 7 years ago. But she is not more cynical. She still believes in the power of people to help each other, the importance of standing up for vulnerable families, and the possibility of building something meaningful through honest work. Marcus thought he could use me and discard me when I became inconvenient. He was wrong. I chose truth over lies, justice over self-protection, and the well-being of strangers over my own comfort. That is not naive. That is who I choose to be, and I am proud of the woman I've become. Did you like this story? Tell us in the comments which city you are listening from. If you enjoyed this dramatic tale of betrayal, fraud and ultimate redemption, please support us with a super thanks so we can continue bringing you more incredible life stories like this one. Thank you so much for your support, Faye. We look forward to your comments about Elena's amazing journey from victim to victor. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that we highly recommend. There is so much more content on our channel, Faye. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect. ****